Dr. Cohen, what I like to think about now is uh, mTOR and how mTOR changes with age. And to kind of frame what I'm thinking about, so there seems to be a tension between inhibiting mTOR, which helps extend lifespan in a lot of animal models, and it may well help humans as well. But also, we need to maintain muscle mass, and we need to remain fit and avoid frailty. And so that kind of implies that we still need to be able to build muscle, which requires mTOR to be activated. And so, what are your thoughts on kind of like the best, um, I guess, the best protocols for using mTOR to extend lifespan, and how much should we activate it, and how much should we try and inhibit it?
Well, I think let's take that statement, which has multiple pieces to it. So we know mTOR is critical for energy sensing, and we know that the body needs to be yin and yang, right? It needs to grow, it needs to repair, it needs to recover. Um, and that involves sort of switching off mTOR and perhaps AMPK, sort of sensing and taking the body and cleaning house, going into an autophagy state. Um, we also know that there's health span and lifespan. So, those are overlapping perhaps, but they're different ball games. So with mTOR, the way I like to envision is we were watching football last night, and I don't watch football very often. My son was sharing U.S. football with his Hungarian girlfriend, and I was just looking at players, and it's been years. It's like the average size of the offensive lineman in the NFL is 6'5", 330 pounds. I mean, incredible. Yes, there's more people on the planet, but that is an mTOR. That is an mTOR response, even in baseball as well. It's like the size of people has grown. Um, when we're younger, we have mTOR signals. When we have more calories, mTOR is driven. The flip side to that is if you keep mTOR on more regularly, right? At some point you can't grow anymore. The cells have done their job and they go into the state of hyperfunction, right? And anyone, really wanting to dig deeper in that, read some of Mikhail Blagoslowny's papers. I really enjoy the way he writes. It's very practical, as well as sort of, it's not your typical science paper. He's more postulating theories and ideas, based on his knowledge. So he talks about hyperfunction and cells going to a state of senescence, and that process is what leads to disease. And it could be cancer, heart disease, or vascular disease, or metabolic disease, and so forth. And those dysfunctions or dysregulations caused by mTOR and being on, he believes, and I believe as well, since it's a large part of it, leads to early disease, right? And it leads to dysfunction and loss of physical function and earlier death. It's unclear to me, um, in humans, is or let's get away from rapamycin. Does mTOR restriction or cycling, which we can talk about, is that going to extend lifespan? Theorizing that the human wall is maybe 115 to 120. No one's lived longer than that, no matter what they've done, right? Maybe there's reports of, but in essence, we don't have any truly documented cases of people living more than 120. And with billions of people on the planet, we should see more than that. And there's reasons for that, and it's probably beyond our conversation here. Is mTOR cycling going to get us past 120? I don't think so. Right. Based on my current knowledge and speaking with other people, I think it gets more of us to 100, 110, so forth, because we don't fall victims to cancer, or we don't fall victims to vascular disease or cognitive ailments or even immune senescence. Those are the four killers, or even falling. So that would be, another one. So think of mTOR as that energy sensing. What we want to try to avoid is that hyperfunction state, as Mikhail speaks about. And our understanding based on calorie restriction and fasting seems to be that if you can cycle, right, and you can use intuition, the body tends to like change, right? It likes to have a hormetic response. So whether it's exercise or sauna or cold or fasting or holding your breath or whatever it might be, the more change that we're exposed to, the more resilient the body is. And that resilience ultimately is what we're shooting for. We want to be resilient as we get older. And, I was just alluding to is like, um, one of our holiday events was swinging a baseball bat. Or we went to played mini golf and swinging a baseball bat. I haven't done that a bunch of years, but like I did okay. Like my reaction was good and I felt good. It's like, okay, 60 something, I still was able to hit the ball quite well. I was like, okay, I hadn't lost that resilience, had I? And like I wasn't thinking directly about that, but doing things differently. And from the highest level, we know that whether as you get older, it's the consistent rut which we begin to lose function. So hopefully that gives a sense of where mTOR is. So with regard to more specifics on that question is cycling on and off. We talked about that previously. We can't just fast all the time, right? Because you'll wind up like looking at someone out of the biosphere. If you go back and look at Roy Walford's, pictures coming out of the biosphere, or looking at, even, the endurance runners who are really, really thin, they become catabolic. And, one could debate, do you have you have a better health span than someone who is, a sprinter? And there's people who have analyzed Olympic athletes and says the pole vaulters live longer than the high jumper. It's, I'm not sure how much difference that's making, but ultimately, until we truly figure out the interventions that take us past 100, 110, which is my vision, um, how do you stay functional? What's you want muscle, you want to be able to balance, you want to be able to be strong and do what you want to do. So you need to weigh that as well. And as we're talking as well, there's the next 5 years or so, there's some dramatic things probably coming on board. So let's stay healthy. Did that answer that question, or did I?
So, well, yes.
Okay.
But I guess the answer was cycling, right? So we need to cycle. We
Yes.
have times of growth, and then we have times of kind of retrenchment. When we are young, late nights and minimal sleep seem to be no problem at all. But when we get older, they have a big drain on our energy and mental focus. Now my wife and I prioritize sleep like never before, and I found Magnesium Breakthrough very helpful for this. Especially during busy times, it helps me drift off faster, keeps my sleep quality top notch. Unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you one or two forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium, designed to calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Both my wife and I are happy to take Magnesium Breakthrough as part of our sleep routine. Support your mind and body with this all-natural, gluten-free, soy-free, lactose-free, full-spectrum magnesium supplement. Simply go to bioptimizers.com/modern and use promo code MODERN10 during your checkout to save 10%. Thank you for your support. So if you were thinking about cycling, how would you think about that? What kind of time scale is this? Weekly, monthly, daily, and how do you cycle?
Yeah. So there's lots of variations in that realm. There there's a Russian physician who has a book out. It's called Carb Cycling. Actually, he's a nominee, or he has a team in the X Prize contest, and his concept is like 3 days a week. Three days a week you're going higher carbohydrates and more strength, and then 4 days a week you're doing more endurance and less. I think that's a bit hard, and I need to speak with him more about it. Um, I liked his ideas, and also Ross Pelton has wrote pharmacologist has talked about mTOR cycling as well, mTOR switch. In the past, and what I found um, that seems to work better from mm, a focused directive is at least 2 to 4 weeks, because you want to have enough time period to achieve a particular goal, without suffering the consequences. So if one were to go into an anabolic phase and consume more carbohydrates and consume more calories and perhaps less fat, right? But consume more protein and carbohydrates. And they're being very physically active, the likelihood of getting any insulin resistance in that time period that's going to be a long-term consequence is pretty low, right? You're not going to suffer in 1 month any issues, especially if you're building. And then cycling off, and it could be 1 month as well, going into a low calorie, or a lower calorie, potentially lower protein anabolic. I'm sorry, catabolic. Not really catabolic, but more of a maintenance, because in that month of anabolic, you're going to put on fat, right? So you're going to put on fat, you're going to put on muscle. So the idea is, and this is through the old bodybuilding concepts, is put on muscle, put on fat, and then cycle down. And now you're going to lose a little muscle, but you're going to lose more fat. So at the end of that 2 months, you have a net gain, and then repeat. And you keep repeating that until you hit a particular threshold. And at some point you go, I'm good, right? At some point, if you've achieved, I think none of, I think when we're younger, I think especially men, we want to be big and have lots of muscle. But I think as you get older, you just want to be strong and functional, and you're a little
Hmm.
bit less concerned about what you look on the beach per se. I mean, we want to, you know, you know what I'm saying? So it's like
Yeah.
at some point you can maintain that, and then maybe it's just a 2 week cycle, and that's all you need to do. Maybe it's you're doing as you're getting older, and as mTOR is becoming more resistant, perhaps, and I think you'll be less likely to develop a resistance if you're cycling all the
Hmm.
time, right? The same thing with metabolic flexibility, and the corollary here is someone who eats a bunch of carbohydrates and doesn't get active, they become insulin resistant, right? And you then try to flip them, and now they're eating protein and fat, and they're trying to do a modified ketosis paleo. They feel awful for a period of time, but then as the enzymes start switching over, as they become metabolically more efficient for protein and fats primarily, they feel better, and blood sugar goes down, and they don't need to eat all the time, and their energy is consistent and their mood is consistent. But then if you stay that way, there's a good amount of people, a good percentage, that find that if you gave them carbohydrates, and I see this a lot, I might fall into that as well. I would fail on I might. I don't think I would, because I eat a little bit more, but I would see people, and I have, fail a glucose tolerance test. Their insulin is tight, they're sensitive, there's no inflammatory markers, but you give them the same glucose load, and their glucose is going to shoot up. So
Hmm.
they become metabolically inflexible now to carbohydrates, and that's probably not a good thing either. So switching things up a bit is important, because you're going to put yourself in a restrictive state, and the body does better when it's more flexible and resilient. So switching on and off is important, for overall health. So figuring out what your goals are, do you want to maintain muscle? Do you want to gain muscle? Or you're trying to lose body fat? Because you really can't do them all. What's your age?
Hmm.
What specifically are you trying to achieve? And then sort of titrate that protocol accordingly. But the key take home point is you can't do one all the way. You can't be pressing mTOR off all the time, nor can you be, pressing mTOR on all the time without suffering. The sumo wrestlers and the offensive linemen are going to suffer consequences, due to that and due to age and illness, and that's clearly seen.